Plastic driven noise, yeah, the mess we make. Machine Blunt Kelly get caught in the flame. Facts and logic with a twist of chest. Strip it down to truth, yeah, forget the rest. Humor blows the lies right out of the park. Look beyond the shadows, dissect the dark. Sparks of laughter fire up the night, bringing clarity where they blur the fight. Cut through the chaos, yeah, the tangle rise. Steampunk Kelly with the set of clear eyes. Truths and jokes gonna rock this show. Step into light where the real facts glow.
Hey there, and thanks for watching today. And today's I'm running a little bit late before I got started, but that's because I'm doing something I have never done before. Well, not done in a while anyway. And I actually did some research and prepared for this show rather than just riffed off the cuff. And there's a reason for that, and that's because I think it's really important that we have a substantive conversation on what is a fascist and what does fascism mean and whether or not Trump fits that bill. And here's my reasoning. You feel free to disagree with me, but I would love to hear why and how I'm wrong. And here's my thinking. If you yell fire in a movie theater, like, you should not yell fire in a movie theater if there isn't a fire. You know, people could get trampled to death running out. It's not a joke. It's not a kind of thing that you just say haphazardly. However, if there is an actual fire in the movie theater and you don't yell fire, you're culpable for the death of everyone that dies in that fire. Whether or not legally culpable, you're morally culpable. You have an obligation to yell fire in a movie theater that is on fire. And by the same token, to just run about yelling everybody's a fascist without any fascism is wrong. It's morally wrong. And I will say Donald Trump was morally wrong when he called Kamala Harris a fascist. He was morally wrong when he called the Democrats fascists. So before you get to, irate that people call Donald Trump a fascist, remember, he has called people fascists. And that does not mean he's not a fascist either. A fascist by any other name is still a fascist. And so the important thing here is not to discuss who is bad and who is good. Let's just talk about what fascism actually is and consider whether or not he fits the term. Because if he fits the term and he is a fascist and we're not calling him a fascist and we're defending him even though he's a fascist and defending his version of fascism, then we are morally culpable for all the damage he has done. Not calling a fascist is like not saying there's a fire in the movie theater when there is actually a fire in the movie theater. Only I would add that it's worse. It's more damaging to not identify a fascist as a fascist, because fascism spreads faster and does more damage than the fire. Fire is going to burn down the movie theater. Fascism could burn down democracy. So what I did is, first, I tried to take my opinion out of this as much as possible. So I'm going to show you some AI results. And that's not because, like, I'm touting AI or something like that. I'm just saying this is like it was the most objective way I could think of to define what fascism is and to describe whether or not Donald Trump is a fascist. So there's various lists that you can find of, like pillars of fascism or aspects of fascism. The thing is fascism isn't really like a coherent ideology like communism is. Like communism is the corporate uh, or the state owns the means of production and distribution, right? Like that you can define easily. Fascism isn't so coherent. So there is a definition, but it's more broad. And then there are the specific aspects of fascism that are more significant if you're trying to understand it. And what I did is I went through and I looked through every, like all of the tenets of fascism and asked Grok if Trump met those conditions. And so what I want to do today is first I want to read off this definition. I used the Google AI for this because I wanted to make sure, you can't just blame the AI I used. And it's not like, Elon Musk is famous for his left-leaning ideology either. So, apologies to those of you who are, opposed to the use of AI, but it was the best I can do. To get in a, like just a objective factual viewpoint, which I think is one of the things that you can do with AI. Although sometimes AI can represent two opposite sides of something as though they're, like equal in weight when one has more weight than the other. Like when you ask it about, like vaccines, for instance, and whether or not vaccines cause autism, it'll present both sides to you and make it seem like the other side is legit. Like the idea that vaccines cause autism has some legitimacy when it doesn't. But anyway, I'm going to go through and I'm going to talk about each of these aspects of fascism and show how Donald Trump ticks off every single box. And if he quantitatively ticks off every single fascist box, then we have to say he is a fascism or he is a fascist. And we would have to say that it is morally wrong to deny he's a fascist if he is actually a fascist. So let's go through these. We're going to start off with the most important one. And maybe the most important one. I won't even define what's important and what's not, because I think they're all important. But ultranationalism is an intense, often exclusionary form of nationalism that promotes the supremacy of a specific national or racial group. So there is a tendency he's had to dismiss, for instance, rulings from judges as, like they're just liberal judges, or he was a Democrat appointed judge, which there's no such thing as a Democrat appointed judge. But let's there are, because a Democratic president did not or appointed a judge does not nullify the fact that they're a legal judge operating in their legal purview. When you deny a judge's decision because they disagree with your ideology, that's, ultranationalism. So let's look into it. These are all examples of different things that Trump does and has done that show he is an ultranationalist. So I'm going to share my screen with you and start reading through some of these things that show he is an ultranationalist. if you'll follow me. All right, so let's get going. So, ultranationalism in Trump's rhetoric and policies. Ultranationalism, often characterized by an extreme emphasis on national identity, sovereignty, and America first priorities that prioritize domestic interests over international alliances, has been a hallmark of Donald Trump's political style. He has explicitly embraced the label of nationalist, framing it as a defense against perceived global threats. This approach draws on historical aggressive nationalism, including expansionist tendencies toward territories like Greenland and confrontations with allies such as Canada. Below are key examples. America First foreign policy. Trump advocated retrenchment from forever wars and international commitments, emphasizing secure borders and industrial revival over globalism. This included withdrawing from agreements like the Paris Climate Accord and criticizing NATO allies for not meeting spending targets. Context impact promoted a version of US exceptionalism as a promised land isolated from foreign entanglements, influencing policies like tariffs on imports to protect American jobs. Now, some people might look at that and say, what's wrong with that? And there's a lot wrong with it. But that's not really the issue right now. The issue is America first consistent with fascism? And it is. It is the cornerstone of fascism. You know, like Germany first was what Hitler said, you know? It is just saying we should prioritize, you know, our own country doesn't in and by itself make your, or doesn't all alone make you a fascist. But he's gone beyond that in terms of removing America from the rest of the world and its responsibility in the rest of the world. He has tried to make it sound like he should be able to tell other governments how much money they should spend on defense spending. That's not America first. That's America only. And especially in today's economy and in today's world where the global economy is so interconnected, it's extremely damaging. But anyway, it's fascist. It's still fascist. This by itself, and this is the important thing, none of these things all by themselves make someone a fascist. It's the totality of all of it. So I know there's going to be some people that want to get in here and they want to just pick apart one thing and try to make one little exception and make it sound like, oh, see, he's not a fascist. No, it's the totality of it. He is not just America first. He has made it America against the world. Rhetoric on immigration and borders. Policies like mass deportations and family separations at the border were justified as protecting American sovereignty from illegal immigrants, often laced with xenophobic language portraying migrants as threats to national purity. And like he has made arguments like, oh, they're poisoning the blood of the country, which are literal arguments that come straight from the Hitler playbook. Like somehow, if somebody comes here illegally, their gene pool is spoiled and will destroy America. He calls it an invasion, as though it is some kind of foreign army coming over here and trying to take over America, and not isolated individuals who are coming over here because either threats in their home country or just so they don't starve to death. A lot of them are coming over because climate change has destroyed their farms and they can't go to cities because the cartels are there. And so they come here for safety and to have a life for their children. That does not make them invaders. You can talk about, well, it's illegal or let them do the right way. And that's a whole other discussion because there is no right way. But calling them a foreign, like calling it an invasion, calling them animals and dehumanizing them and saying they're rapists and murderers and all of this denigrating language for them just because they are from another country is fascist. You don't quote Hitler and not get compared to a fascist. Amplifying white nationalist figures. Trump dined with and declined to fully condemn white supremacists like Nick Fuentes, who, by the way, is the leading candidate for the motivation of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. The one person that seems to have influenced Tyler Montgomery the most is Nick Fuentes, who dined with Donald Trump. He has pardoned members of groups like the Proud Boys, framing them as defenders of American values against radical left threats. These are people who literally tried to overthrow the country on his behest. They tried to install him as president when he lost an election. That is fascism. Ethno-nationalist undertones. Statements invoking racehorse theory, eugenic-like ideas, and portraying native-born Americans as superior while criticizing multiculturalism as a dilution of the national identity. Tied to broader Trump that prioritizes ethnic and cultural hegemony over pluralism. How many times has he said things like, you won't have a country anymore? He identifies being American as agreeing with him. He identifies the country as being with him. They talk about real Americans. What is a real American? To them, real Americans are people that agree with them. They use real Americans to contrast with other actual American citizens that were born and raised in America and have roots going back to, colonial days, like myself. We are not American to them. They are making it native-born Americans, not all native-born Americans, just native-born Americans that agree with them. So how is that not nationalism? How is that not ultranationalism? How is that not fascism? So, okay, that's the first thing. He ticks off the first box over and over again. There's many, many examples of it, as I have just highlighted. So yes, by that criteria, he meets the definition of fascism. Okay, so next up. We're going to... Next up is blaming enemies, scapegoating as a core tactic. So let's pop this one up. Fascists use propaganda and conspiracy theories to blame specific groups such as minorities, immigrants, or political opponents for the nation's problems. Kind of an us versus them kind of thing. And us versus theming is very, very fascist. And it's something Hitler did. It's something Mussolini did. It's something that Franco did. It is a very fascist tendency. Okay. And let's not even pretend that he does not do the us versus them thing. But we'll still go into this and provide specific examples for the ostriches with their heads stuck in the sand. Trump's style frequently involves scapegoating political opponents, minorities, and foreign entities to deflect blame and rally supporters, often portraying them as existential threats to unify his base. There is no question this happens. This politics of grievance extends to labeling dissenters as enemies within, a phrase he has repeated to justify potential military action against domestic critics. Examples include enemy within against political opponents. Trump has called Americans who oppose him, such as Democrats, journalists, and radical left activists, whatever radical means there, the enemy within, worse than China or Russia, and suggested using the military or National Guard against them. He has used this in rallies to dehumanize foes as sick people or cheating like dogs, fostering division and justifying authoritarian responses. So you'll see here, there's these like little gray boxes. These are all citations to establish that each of these things is not made up. After I'm done with this podcast, I'm going to put all of this on a Substack article so that if you doubt anything at all I'm saying, you can go and you can confirm it on from the original source. Nothing here is made up. Nothing here is hyperbolized. Nothing this here is being taken out of context. All of this is 100% valid, and it's not just an isolated phrase he used. Like I've seen some people say, Chris Murphy said, you know, we're in a war for democracy, and they're using that to say that's why, you know, you know, like there's, you know, as an example of leftist rhetoric driving violence. Chris Murphy was saying that as a use to vote against Trump's authoritarian takeover, to defend the Democrats using the filibuster. He was not encouraging violence. He was arguing for the filibuster. So if you want to talk about taking things out of context, please at least try to be honest yourselves. Okay, so anyway, the next one, scapegoating immigrants and minorities. Gee, we've hardly heard this before, right? Blaming immigrants, blaming migrants, Black and Latino communities, and trans people for economic woes and social chaos while promising mass deportations as a fix. Over and over again. And you say, well, where did he blame migrant or Blacks and Latinos? Every time he talks about DEI, he's complaining about Blacks and Latinos. That's just the language he uses to, you know, to do it. And again, all of this will be backed up on a Substack article. And this is interesting, part of a broader grievance strategy to appeal to non-white voters by stoking resentments against elites and invaders. So he's not only criticizing that kind of thing, but he's also using it to get, like, how did he get the Latino vote? Because you have people that are, you know, Latino, that are American citizens, that were born here and raised here, just like I was. And he is using the fact that people are coming here illegally to get them to say, oh, my ancestors came over here the right way. And it's like, the way your ancestors came over was the same, exactly the same, but the law changed. And the rhetoric changed. You know, and I know this because right now there is no legal way for, you know, unless your parents actually came over here on a visa, I should say. Like, you didn't need a visa to come over here until like 100 years ago. And then in the 1980s, when illegal immigration really started to become an issue, Reagan gave everybody amnesty. So this whole thing is of scapegoating immigrants and minorities. Yes, that is fascist, and yes, Donald Trump does it. Foreign and institutional blame shifting, accusing China of the COVID-19 pandemic, China versus the UN of inaction on global conflicts, and Euro India of economic exploitation while deflecting from domestic failures. Everything is always another country's fault. Nothing is ever his fault. Or it's the Democrats' fault. It's never his fault. He has literally said he has never done anything wrong. So, yes, foreign and institutional blame shifting is very much a box that is ticked. Targeting DEI and woke initiatives. Labeling diversity programs as the cause of disasters like bridge collapses or military setbacks, using them as a dog whistle for culture wars. And, I'd just like to add to that list the airline crash in DC. Immediately, they shifted it. They blamed DEI. And DEI is not hiring quotas. And woke has just become this catch-all word for I don't agree with what you said, and I don't have an argument that is cohesive. So I'm just going to scream woke at the top of my lungs and magically make you wrong. Like they don't even woke is not it has become a meaningless, empty word. Woke is what they say. Woke is how they use what they claim we use fascism as. Everything is woke. Just scream woke and you're right. All woke means is it is an expression that came up between Black Americans that said, hey, stay aware that racism exists. That's all it means. Anti-Semitic and anti-Jewish tropes. This is my favorite thing about the MAGAs is that they act like they are the defender of all things Jewish. And he constantly says things like that. He is an anti-Semite. I don't care that Jared Kushner is Jewish. He didn't marry him. His daughter did. He has globalism, George Soros tropes, elitist. These are all anti-Semitic tropes, and they stem back to, like medieval Europe, when Jewish people were only allowed to be moneylenders, and they were also the only people allowed to be moneylenders. Loaning money was against the Catholic law. So no Catholics were allowed to lend money. And because of that, Jewish people were the only ones that could legally lend money. And they weren't allowed to work in any other way almost in some places. And so then the trope came up that they are responsible for everything because they control all the money. This was not a choice the Jews made. This was something forced upon them. And now those tropes are used whenever they talk about, oh, George Soros is paying for all the protests, as though there aren't wealthy people funding Republicans and buying Supreme Courts and buying elections. So every single one of these boxes, he absolutely ticks off. So yes, he meets the scapegoating criteria to be called a fascist. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Trump's use of militarism. All right. Let's read what that is. Militarism is Trump's rhetoric and policies, often involves advocating for expanded military power, using the armed forces for domestic issues, and prioritizing military solutions over diplomacy. Any of that not ring true? This includes proposals to deploy troops against civilians, pardoning service members accused of war crimes, and emphasizing aggressive national defense. Examples draw from his campaign's presidency and post-presidency statements. Below is a table of key instances. Renaming the Department of Defense to Department of War. Trump has proposed reverting the name to emphasize a more aggressive stance, criticizing current military leadership as woke and vowing to purge generals he deems insufficiently tough. And by insufficiently tough, he means has different opinions. In 2025 speeches, he argued this would restore a focus on winning wars rather than diversity initiatives, tying into broader calls for militaristic reforms like firing woke generals. So his argument is, this is all very, 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 very fascist. It's like, if you have black people in the military, we can't win wars anymore or whatever. And you can argue that that's not what he meant, but his actions prove louder than words. When he's sitting there firing every general who is black and every general who is a woman and every admiral who is black and every admiral who is a woman, then it starts to sound a lot more racist and a lot less anti-DEI. When he's criticizing DEI as like you're not earning things on merit, and then appoints the least meritorious Secretary of Defense or War in American history, there has never been a less qualified person for that position than Pete Kegsbreath. So yeah, that box is ticked all the way off. Deploying military for domestic operations. Advocated, now he's beyond advocating. He's actually, he advocated using the Insurrection Act to federalize National Guard troops for issues like protests, immigration enforcement, and urban crime, including threats to send troops to cities like Chicago and Los Angeles. Of course, now he is actually doing that. He has used the American military against American citizens in Washington, D.C. He's done it in Los Angeles. He's threatening to do it in Baltimore. He's threatening to do it in Memphis. He's threatening to do it in Chicago. Guess what all those places have in common? Not that they're Democrat run, but they all have large minority populations. He is using the military against people of color. He is using the military against anyone who dares disagree with him. We have a constitutional right to protest, and he is drumming up fears of riots to justify putting down riots, which are really just protests. Pardoning accused war criminals. He issued pardons for service members like Eddie Gallagher, Navy SEAL accused of stabbing a detainee, and others convicted of misconduct in Iraq and Iran. If I remember right, Eddie Gallagher was not just accused of stabbing a detainee. He actually stabbed a detainee, and he was actually convicted by court-martial, not a civilian trial, a military trial. And then that was politicized. Why can't he just go around stabbing people? Eddie Gallagher was a war criminal that was rewarded by Donald Trump. And he frames this as supporting warriors against a deep state, the mock bureaucracy. And he's seen as endorsing unchecked military aggression, undermining international law. All right. Another example of this is he is using the military to bomb boats that he claims are cartel members. He's killing people on the open seas without any legal qualification. And you know that's just true. It's just true. He has no legal justification, but he doesn't need one. Okay. Order development of a missile. Okay. Building a U.S. Iron Dome and Space Force expansion. He ordered the development of a missile defense system and created the Space Force as a sixth military branch, emphasizing dominance in space against aerial threats. Portrayed as essential for American strength with 2025 executive orders accelerating deployments, reflecting a view of perpetual military readiness. And you can say, well, what's wrong with that? And it's not that by itself. This is a lot of these things are by themselves not necessarily bad, but in the context of everything, this is adding to the, oh, we are under constant threat. And so we need to spend trillions of dollars on this, space system that will defend us. And all of this does is just channel money into the corporate elite. I do not feel safer with Donald Trump as president. I feel much more threatened, not by other countries, but by my own. Treating drug cartels as terrorists. Not just proposed, he has designated cartels as a terrorist organization to enable military strikes, including drone attacks or invasions. And, the word terrorist means something. A terrorist is somebody who uses physical violence to obtain political means. And I've said this before. People are probably going to get tired of me bringing this up, but cartels are terrible, but they are not terrorists. They are not politically motivated. They are monetarily motivated. All they are in it for is the money. They are not trying to change American politics. So they are not terrorist organizations. Labeling them as terrorist organizations so that you can kill people without a warrant is just fascism. Bombing ships on the open sea under the pretext that they're cartels, which weren't proven, and that the cartels are terrorist organizations, which is just bunk. That is fascism. Politicizing the military. He restored names of Confederate named bases and used Trump's for broader militarization, turning federal land into military installation, which, by the way, he's building concentration camps on, which is kind of a lot of bit fascist. So, does he fit the description of militarism? Has he actually said and done things which tick off that box? Yes, he has. That's not a debate. That's not a discussion. That's a fact. Whoa, I got a lot of comments here. Sorry. I'm reading on a different screen, so I'm missing all the comments. So I'll just take a break here and show some of your comments. Ancestors came the white way, right? There was a comment for true, but I'm not sure what when that was said. Wow. Okay, so Halbach, hey there. How you doing, Halbach? Thanks for commenting. He does qualify, but the bigger question is he one because he's a narcissist or just echoing what he's told? That's a good question. I would say that In a lot of ways, he seems to be the mouthpiece of Stephen Miller, but he seems to agree with Stephen Miller. So I'm not sure that it's like a choice. I'd say he is a narcissist who echoes what he is told. So Miller doesn't. Right. Miller does not quote Hitler. He quotes his chief person for propaganda, Joseph Goebbels, which is like one of my favorite names for Stephen Miller is Stephen Gerbil. Because but in a lot of ways that's an insult to gerbils. So there's somebody said true. I don't know what the context was. All right, ancestors came the white way. Back to Halbach. Now you see what Trump, what is driving Trump. Not sure what that was. Okay. After first term, those in the background, a lot of time to prepare. Yes, Project 2025 took 4 years. Like this is all a plan. This is not an accident, and it is a fascist plan. Yes, and this is literally. I heard Charlie Kirk complaining about, like DEI is taking jobs from white people, and so therefore it's racist, as though the job inherently belongs to a white person. And I just want to clarify this because I think a lot of people have allowed DEI to be another term that's misconstrued. DEI is not about hiring quotas. It's not. It's about diversity in DEI means you recruit broader. Like, oh, we don't have enough, like 95% of pilots. I love this as the example. 95% of pilots were white men. Okay. And there was, a lot of reasons for that. The main drive or the main recruitment for pilots for decades was ex-military. So, and in the military, almost all the pilots were white males because that's how the military was operating. And then all the white males took up, they'd get out of the military and they would become airline pilots. So like 95%. And that's not like one of those Trump numbers where he like says, well, it's like 70, 75, 90. Some people are even saying 95%. And then everybody runs around saying 95%. 95% is an actual number. Now it's down to 80%. 80% of pilots are white males. And you have people like Charlie Kirk acting like this is racist because Black people are taking jobs from white people. And I don't even want to get into all the rest of it, but just think about that. He is saying that there is something evil or wrong about white males only having 80% of the jobs. Like 25% of the people have 85% of the jobs or 80% of the jobs, but somehow that group of people is the one that is being oppressed. Okay. All this would be a topic if he could show signs of human understanding, like all of his predecessors, if liked or not. Yeah. He does seem to be immune to human thought. All right. And then we'll go one more here. A little bit of column A and column B. Yes. And a lot of bit. Okay. So let's go on to the next aspect of fascism. Glorification of violence. Oh, he would never do that, right? Whoops. Okay, let me change my banner here. All right. And all right. So I'll try and remember to. I forgot to do one on glorification. All right, we'll just leave the militarism up there because I think that's related. All right. So Trump has frequently praised or incited violence in rallies, interviews, and social media, often targeted. I just want to point out that there's been all this stuff about how the left rhetoric is inciting people to violence. That all this violence is because the left is using violent rhetoric, and it ignores just how violent almost all of Trump's speeches are. He constantly encourages violence against the left. Okay, so let's go through some of these before I get myself worked up. Trump has frequently praised or incited violence in rallies, interviews, and social media, often targeting protesters, journalists, political opponents, and minorities. This includes encouraging physical confrontations, endorsing extrajudicial killings, and using violent imagery to rally supporters. Here are prominent examples in a table format. Encouraging violence against protesters. Back in, his first run at rallies, urged supporters to knock the crap out of hecklers, promising to pay legal fees. Remember that? And said one protester, "I'd love to punch him in the face." Remember how much they just lost their lids when Joe Biden said something about how he'd like to take out, take Trump out to the woodshed and punch him or something, and they lost all their crap over that. I admit, I'll say that Biden went too far in saying that. But the way they ignore just the enormous amount of violent rhetoric from Trump, and then they take these little isolated phrases from a Democrat here and there to make it sound like these things are equal. These are not equal. 95% of the violent rhetoric in this country is not even left versus right. 95% of the violent rhetoric in this country comes from Donald Trump and his administration. Stephen Miller can't even go a whole sentence without violent rhetoric. Praising body slamming of reporter. Lauded Representative Greg Gianfort for assaulting a journalist. Any guy that can do a body slam, he is my guy. And this was because a reporter asked him a question that he didn't like. And the story they were reporting on was true. And the asshole ended up getting voted out. But he is encouraging violence against a journalist. Can you imagine if Barack Obama did that, or if Nancy Pelosi did that? If somebody punched Jesse Waters in the face and the Democrats all stood and cheered? Can you imagine the reaction from Fox News and the right? But no. When Trump does it, it's okay. When the looting starts, the shooting starts. He tweeted this during the George Floyd protests, echoing a 1960s segregationist phrase endorsing lethal force against rioters. This goes into, there was a mayor of Miami, I think it was, who would use this phrase. It was either a chief of police or a mayor or somebody. And this is actual endorsement of violence against peaceful protesters. Yes, that is amplifying the violent rhetoric. He suggested shooting protesters, reportedly asked aides, "Can't you just shoot them? Just shoot them in the legs or something," about Black Lives Matter demonstrators. This is from Defense Secretary Mark Esper. And Trump denied it, but aligns with calls for retributions against perceived enemies. If I have to make a choice between anybody else's word and Donald Trump is the biggest liar in American history. There are over 30,000 documented lies of his just in his first term, and his second term, he's lying even more. And there's the 4 years of lies in between them. The man, it's harder. The only time he accidentally says true things are when they're accidentally true. Like when he said that, the he blamed the escalator breaking on idiots running the country, and it turns out that the guy that stopped the escalator was working for him, not the UN. So that part is true, but he didn't mean it to be true. Proud Boys stand back and stand by. During a debate, he told the far right group to prepare, which they interpreted as a call to arms. And they literally did it. On January 6th, they were one of the main supporters that attacked the Capitol building in furtherance of a goal to overturn the government. And I get tired of hearing how January 6th was not an insurrection. In and of itself, it was not the entire insurrection, but it was the capstone of an insurrection. Its goal was to delay. For those who have not heard this, the goal was to delay the vote to certify the election, because the Constitution explicitly states that that has to happen on January 6th. So if they could delay it until January 7th, then the next play was to say, oh, we couldn't do it on January 6th. We're in a state of confusion. We need to decide which votes are valid, which electoral votes to count. And that's why a bunch of Republican senators and a bunch of Republican congressmen all were voting against certification. The whole idea was to, make it seem like there was some sort of, actual substance to the election was stolen rhetoric. And there wasn't. And I see people saying that the 2024 election was stolen. I disagree with that too. I'm consistent on this. It's basically impossible to steal a presidential election. And there's just too many variables involved. There's too many states involved. There's too many precincts involved. There's too many people involved to really steal an election. It's impossible. Endorsing, but anyway, the Proud Boys were convicted and he pardoned them. They literally tried to stand back and stand by until he called them to step up. And they did. He is a fascist. Endorsing extrajudicial killing. He praised police for killing Antifa suspect Michael Rouhani. That's the way it has to be. There has to be retribution. I actually don't know who that is or what that one's about. All right, Michael Rouhani. So this was okay, this is I remember now. Yeah, this was an anti-fascist that was killed by Aaron Danielson, who was a Proud Boy. And it's okay because he was killing an Antifa, and not a person or something. So this is encouraging vigilante justice as long as that vigilante agrees with him. And, like the retribution of what? Retribution for what? Anyway. He told officers not to protect suspects' heads. Please don't be too nice. You can take the hand away. Okay. So, and then he joked about smashing suspects' heads into cars. Somehow I don't think he meant, those suspects as being white people. But he's also encouraged stop and frisk. He's for stop and frisk. He's for things which are provably racist policies. And he's against any kind of what is the word for that? Somebody might be able to remind me. But the notion that cops can't be sued personally for anything unless they've been sued for it before and all that. He's for protecting police even when they act violently, even when what their actions are would be illegal if they weren't cops. Threatening riots if not nominated. He warned of riots if denied the GOP nomination in March of 2016. In Charlottesville, he defended white nationalists. You also had people that were very fine people on both sides. And while that has been downplayed, I would like to point out that he said those actual words. And people are like, oh, well, if you look at the context. Actually, if you really look at the context, he started talking about them, and then he started talking about the other side, and the other side here being the left. And then him saying, you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. So he was qualifying that, yes, there were some very fine people on the left side too. So if you really want to get into the context and what he was actually saying, he was saying everybody on the side of the white supremacists were very fine people, and some of the people on the left were also very fine people. All right. So let's go to the next one. Am I making my point yet? Is this not just a arbitrary taking one quote out of context and saying that makes you a fascist? Or is it a tendency of fascism that he is ticking off every single box? So how Beck, after all of this back and forth, why didn't you all impeach already for the upteenth time? I really wish we had. And the only reason is every single Democrat did. The question is, why didn't Republicans? Democrats, every single Democrat voted for impeachment both times. And I will say also, the second impeachment of Trump was the most votes from a person's own party for anybody that has been impeached, which is there's only been 4 impeachments in U.S. history. So it's not like that's a huge number. But yeah, that's a good question. You should ask the Republicans that. Why didn't they impeach? Because I'd love to know. I'd love to know from Ted Cruz. I'd love to know from Mitch McConnell. Why is it okay when your side tries to overthrow the government? How's that not fascism? All right, so let's go to the next topic. Suppression of opposition. Shadow. Oh, I'm sorry. We want to go to cult of personality. Forgot to make a banner for that one. Okay, so let's So the next one is the cult of personality. This is a big one. Like with Hitler, you know, like Heil Hitler. Like there's always with fascist governments, they identify the entire nation with a person, and if you disagree with that person, you disagree with that nation. Like, to be a patriot means you have to follow Donald Trump. So, you know, is there any question that that is how MAGA feels? If you disagree with Trump, you have a disease called Trump derangement syndrome. You must be deranged if you don't agree with Trump. All right. They built a golden idol of Trump and prayed to it. I do not know how much more cultic you can get than that. Like, they say that we were a cult with Obama, as though there is any comparison there at all. I do not recall seeing people praying to a golden idol of Barack Obama. All right, so how does the concept of a cult of personality refers to when a leader builds excessive adoration or unquestioning loyalty among followers, often prioritizing personal allegiance over ideology, institutions, or facts. Critics, including psychologists, historians, and political analysts, have drawn parallels between Donald Trump and the MAGA, Make America Great Again movement, and his historical examples like those under Mussolini or Hitler, where the leader becomes synonymous with the nation. Drawing from psychological studies and political commentary, here are common traits associated with cults of personality, with specific instances linked to Trump and MAGA. Unquestioning loyalty to the leader. Followers exhibit devotion that transcends policy or evidence, often defending the leader against all criticism. If you want to prove to somebody that Trump is a fascist, just ask them to name one thing that they disagree with Trump about. Trump's 2016 statement: I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, which critics say foreshadowed unwavering support, despite scandals like impeachments or the January 6th Capitol riot. There are so many things where I thought this has to be the thing that breaks through. And watching the Capitol riot, which again was an insurrection, but not the whole insurrection, just a part of the insurrection. If you can't see what's wrong with that, then you are in a cult. And there's no whataboutism here. There's no, well, what if Barack Obama did it? Well, Barack Obama didn't do it. No one ever did anything remotely like that. Supporters at rallies chant, I am Trump, as though they are being prosecuted if Trump is prosecuted for crimes Trump actually committed. Trump did the things for which he was indicted, and that is why he was indicted. Supporters at rallies chant, I am Trump, or wear merchandise idolizing him as a savior figure, with some psychologists noting identity fusion, where a person's identity merges with the leader's. This is the most true thing ever stated. You see these people that, you know, like their whole house is decorated in MAGA, and their whole car is decorated in MAGA, and their whole wardrobe is decorated in MAGA. And then they say, you're in a cult because you have TDS. The biggest cult in the history of the country is MAGA. And the falsest god in the history of the country is Donald Trump. I'm sorry to quote myself, but damn, that was a good quote. Okay, so rejection of facts or dissent. Cults often dismiss contrary information as fake news or enemy propaganda, enforcing groupthink. And the persistence of the big lie about the 2020 election being stolen, despite court rulings and audits. Polls show a majority of MAGA adherents believe this solely based on Trump's claim, leading to events like January 6th. Ask people, ask MAGA, who won the 2020 election? They cannot say Joe Biden actually won. They might concede eventually that Joe Biden was president and it wasn't like a fake propped up, but they'll qualify it with saying, he was too senile to actually run and blah, 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 and so on and so forth, and just a bunch of hyperbolic rhetoric. But they cannot say he won. They will not admit that COVID was a real virus that actually killed people, or that vaccines actually saved people's lives, which it did. These are not opinions. These are facts. Critics like cult expert Stephen Hassan described this as reality testing impairment, where loyalty trumps where loyalty trumps evidence. An ironic use of the word Trump there. But yes. And this is something I've had thoughts on, and I'm a Christian, so this is not like an anti-Christian thing. But here's the problem with a lot of Christians is that they view their beliefs as they place their beliefs above facts and not facts above beliefs. And there's a big difference in what happens. I form my beliefs on what the facts are. They form the facts, they determine what facts they will receive based on what their beliefs are. You've got how many of them that think that the earth is only 6,000 years old, in spite of a preponderance of facts? In spite of all the scientific evidence. And it's not even what the Bible says, but that's another issue. But we need to align our belief with the facts and not try and align our facts with our beliefs. And that is a huge part of that mindset. Is something Trump takes advantage of. And yes, it is very much occultic and it is very much fascist. Charismatic rallies and symbolism. Large gatherings reinforce the leader's mythic status through emotional appeals and shared rituals. You never hear Trump talk about his rallies, do you? Trump's rallies feature chants like "lock her up" or "fight like hell," creating a communal bond. Attendees describe euphoric experience akin to religious revivals. And one other thing I've mentioned on this show before is someone did a study of the prayer before every single one of Trump's rallies, and every single prayer was for God to do right by Trump, and none of them were for Trump to do right by God. So if God doesn't do what Trump wants, God is wrong. Not if Trump doesn't do what God wants, Trump is wrong. To them, Trump is not just God, he is above God. So we'll have more on this and the scapegoating and us versus them mentality, but this is also a part of the whole cultic thing. And it goes back to the Trump derangement syndrome. Either you are a Trump fan, you are a Trump follower, you are MAGA, or else you have this debilitating mental disease. That is how they view the world. And it's how Trump portrays the world. Trump labels opponents as enemies within. He's called them Democrats, media, the left, never Trumper, Republicans. All of those, anybody that is not MAGA is an enemy of the state, not an enemy of Trump. But in MAGA minds, Trump and the state are synonymous. And that is fascism. And this has led to many rifts and social divisions, family rifts and social divisions, with some MAGA members comparing it to leaving a cult. I will say this. It's true in my own family. My brother-in-law has just basically isolated himself from everyone else in the family because we won't see how MAGA is right, and we won't see how Trump was sent by God. He literally believes Trump was sent by God. And so therefore, if you are against Trump, you are against God. The movement's cohesion relies on the leader potentially fragmenting without them. And this one, our analysts predict MAGA could splinter post-Trump due to his unique charisma. Figures like J.D. Vance lack similar appeal. And I'll just say this on this. Why do you think that they're trying to make it so that he can run for a third term? Because they know they can't win an election unless he is running. They have made Donald Trump and America synonymous in their minds. So that ticks off that box. We've got some comments here I'll come back and look at. Oh, wait. Yeah, here we go. They. Yeah, that's what, ironically, they do. They have made us a them and them an us. I will say I differ in that I don't think that everybody who disagrees with me is my enemy. I think that I disagree with people on the right and I disagree with people on the left that agree that Trump is a fascist. Like saying that the us, when I say us, I am referring to the them that Trump has made us, if you'll follow me. Okay, I guess my stream got reported for some reason because Mouse Tony is in a cult. Okay. That is why MAGA does not like Kimmel, etc. Right. They don't like it when people actually say things that are true. All right. So let's go on to the next one. Whoops. All right. So Trump's suppression of opposition. All right, let's go back to my banners. All right, suppression of opposition. Any form of dissent, criticism, or political opposition is forcibly suppressed. This often involves persecution of political entities and other groups deemed undesirable. And this one I will qualify as it is in process. Like some people will argue, oh, if he's such a fascist, why are you able to stream this live broadcast that MAGA just reported to YouTube? Well, because he hasn't gotten that far yet. He did call me a terrorist and label me as being part of a terrorist organization because I gave money to MoveOn.org 10 years ago. He is saying, or if I gave money to Act Blue or donated money to the Kamala Harris campaign or James Terralico, like he is saying everybody who he's saying there's Antifa, which is what is Antifa, and anybody who donates to them or helps them. So I had a guy named he's a good guest and a good guy. I'm not going to mention him, but he has Antifa in his bio. So does me having him on my podcast, does that make me Antifa? Does that make me an Antifa supporter? Does that make me an enemy of the state? He's trying to get Jimmy Kimmel fired. He is saying he's going after The View, and he's using the power of the government to leverage networks into firing people. And he succeeded in some regards. He succeeded with Stephen Colbert. All right, so now let's go on. Well, we'll just suppression of opposition involves tactics like legal harassment, threats of prosecution, media intimidation, and misuse of government institutions to silence critics. Which critics erodes democratic norms and it echoes authoritarian playbooks. Does anybody seriously not agree that he is doing all of that? Especially in his second term? I know one person who doesn't, James Comey. They're going to indict him for telling lies to Congress, and they can't even say how he lied to Congress. These aren't trumped up charges. These are made up charges. These charges are so made up, they had to go out and hire an insurance lawyer to make them. All right. So what are some of the things he's done? Executive orders strip security clearances from critics like Cybersecurity Director Chris Krebs and Ex-Attorney General Sally Yates, followed by Department of Justice investigations into their disloyalty. He's literally stripping security clearances from people that need security clearances because they're not loyal enough. And this is seen as a chilling dissent among officials, while Krebs suing over the order as unconstitutional. And this is really significant because if Donald Trump is using violent rhetoric against you, like he does against Dr. Fauci needs that protection because you don't know when some nut job is going to come and try to kill them. And this is why I get so frustrated when they sit there and they talk about the violent left, and all of the violent rhetoric is coming from the right. And they misuse and they take out of context, something from 2020 where, like people were saying like, oh, in the protests, we need a fight, as though they were saying that means we need to go out and attack police or something. They can't honestly defend what Trump is doing, so they have to dishonestly pretend that's what the opposition is doing. He pushed for indictments against figures like Liz Cheney and Adam Schiff for treasonous January 6th committee work. By mid-2025, special counsels were appointed. Ongoing since 2024 threats, NPR tracked over 50 such vows, leading to 10 active cases by September of 2025, and no convictions, no charges, and no laws broken. He's making it against the law for people to tell the truth. How is that not fascism? And he's directed ICE to detain protest leaders and NGO figures opposing deportation policies, labeling them as domestic terrorists. April 2025 sweeps netted dozens per the Brennan Center of reports sparking lawsuits over First Amendment violations. The First Amendment still says that there is a freedom to protest. And yes, that should mean protest peacefully. But an ICE person shoving a protester into another ICE person does not mean that they are assaulting the ICE person. It means they got shoved into an ICE person. And they're not just charging your typical everyday protester, college student or whatever. They're not just arresting nobody. They're literally charging members of the House of Representatives who are trying to carry out their lawful duties with assault. This is an attack on the First Amendment. They have media and free speech intention, efforts to control narratives through regulatory pressures and threats, FCC license revocations for central coverage. So they're threatening to pull broadcast license from networks like ABC and MSNBC for fake news on immigration and economy. FCC probes launched against 5 stations by September 25th. All right. Not allowing networks to disagree with you is fascism. And it's not just that. It's NYT reported self-censorship rising, with one station preemptively dropping a Trump critic segment. So this is what happens. You blackmail ABC into paying off $16 million. And other networks go, it's not worth the fight. These, and people, like rightfully say the network should fight back, but they also ignore fighting back costs those networks millions of dollars. And even a major network does not have the money and resources that the federal government does. So this is just bullying networks into staying silent. And like Jimmy Kimmel said last night, once you give the lunch, the playground bully your lunch money, you're always giving him your lunch money. If you give him your lunch, you're always giving him your lunch. And this is not a controversy, or this is not a debate that the FCC tried to do this. I mean, the guy, Carr, went on a broadcast and recorded himself threatening ABC live. This is not like some hyperbolic extreme, taking thing out of context. And then after the Trump administration tried to walk everything back, Donald Trump came back and doubled down and said he was going after The View too. And it's funny, it says here, administration denied direct involvement, but then also admitted it, but praised the move as ending bias. This idea that bias, that the government, let me just say, even if Jimmy Kimmel is biased, the government is not the one to say that there is bias. Do we really want to argue that there's no bias on Fox News? Can you imagine if Barack Obama or Joe Biden threatened to pull Fox Network's license over what Fox News is doing? Do you think that people would say that's not censorship? That's not government censorship? It is. But again, Barack Obama and Joe Biden would never do that. And neither would George Bush or Ronald Reagan. No one else has ever done this. So this is not one of those things about, well, when your side does this, it's okay. Our side doesn't do it. And neither did your side until you made your side Donald Trump. That's why you have people like Rick Wilson who are lifelong Republicans and legitimate conservatives. That's why even conservatives oppose Donald Trump. Okay. Defunding public media. Executive order cut NPR and PBS funding by 50%, accusing them of propaganda against America. Led to layoffs and program cancellations per ACLU challenges. There's no propaganda on NPR or PBS. The propaganda is that reality is propaganda. Donald Trump propaganda is that NPR and PBS are biased. They aren't. Actually, you look at every objective measurement, NPR and PBS are the most neutral networks. And there's like a lot more I have to say about the slashing the NPR PBS budget and how it, is also canceling out the, like emergency broadcasting system, which is what most of that money goes for. But we won't go into that. People are going to die because of this irresponsible move and rhetoric, though. Okay, direct attacks to deter opposition. So this is still all under the umbrella of suppression of opposition. Okay. Radical left retribution after the Kirk assassination. Blamed radical left for conservative activist Charlie Kirk's killing, vowing mass arrests and total crackdowns on protesters and donors. And I don't know if you do or don't know what the Reichstag fire is, but if you don't, you should. The Reichstag fire was the act of one man whose name escapes me right now, but the Nazis used that incident to blame the communists. And then basically everybody who opposed Hitler was a communist at that point. And so they started arresting communists. They used it to take away free speech and free press and freedom to protest the government. If that's resonating, that's only because that's exactly what Trump is doing right now. That is exactly what he is saying when he blamed the radical left for conservatives activist Charlie Kirk's killing. That's exactly what he meant when he labeled everyone who disagrees with him as Antifa and declared Antifa as a terrorist organization. Even though there's no law against domestic terrorism. That's why the Proud Boys aren't one. And I would point out, the Proud Boys actually participated in domestic terrorism. He revoked the protection for ex-Vice President Harris, citing wasteful spending among ongoing legal battles, which is just appalling. She was vice president of the United States. She needs that Secret Service detail as much as any other vice president does. But she's a vice president that disagreed with him and had the audacity to run against him and criticize him. Why is it wasteful spending on Kamala Harris, but it wasn't wasteful spending on him? He would be dead if it weren't for the Secret Service. He targeted Ivy League schools with budget cuts for hosting pro-Palestinian events or critical curricula affecting $2 billion in federal aid. And you know what? First of all, they weren't pro-Hamas. They were pro-Palestine. And they were anti-genocide. And whether you agree with their statements or not, whether you agree with their positions or not, they have a right to those positions and they have a right to those protests. And the schools had a right to protect their rights to protest. And it's funny. It's funny that if an anti-Semite wants to go on campus and have a rally or start a club like the Turning Point, then it's censorship if they don't get to promote their version of anti-Semitism. And by that, I include things like globalism, elitists, and all of the kinds of anti-Semitic rhetoric that never stops coming from the MAGAs. So if you want to protect Charlie Kirk's right, then you have to protect the rights of the pro-Palestinian protesters. It's either one or the other. You don't get to pick and choose. Okay. So I think we've covered that in pretty good detail, right? We can agree that he tries to suppress opposition. We got some comments here. Hi, Joe. Joe's great follower. How many times did Trump strip clearance from White House former officials? It was a running joke. So many times. And he also tried to give people that couldn't clear their security clearance, he just gives them security clearance anyway. Don't get mad because he states facts. I'm not mad because he states facts. I would love it if he started stating facts. There is insufficient evidence for the congressperson's case in my. I'm sorry, Joe. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Oh, right. The one that got shoved into the other ICE agent and then charged with assault. Yeah, I think anybody that watches that cannot reasonably conclude that she assaulted anybody. In fact, if I were her defense lawyer, my entire case would just be playing the scene and saying, see, where was the assault? And the defense rests. Because all you have to do is watch it one time and you know she didn't assault anybody. I remember you using the lunch boy analogy first. Thank you, Joe, for giving me credit. I didn't want to be accused of stealing it, but yeah, I've been using that quite a bit. I think it's the perfect analogy because that's exactly what he is. Jimmy Kimmel did state it better than I did, though. Yes, and I'm biased. I'm biased towards humane treatment and freedom of speech. And this is actually a great point because I think that we misuse the word bias. Like, bias actually implies unfair. Like, if you look at the actual meaning of the word. So having an opinion does not necessarily make an informed, factual opinion does not make you biased. It just means you have an opinion. Having an uninformed opinion that you pulled out of your butt because you believe a certain way makes you biased. For example, if I were to say, I think slavery is bias, or I think slavery is bad, that does not mean I have an anti-slavery bias. It doesn't mean that the neutral ground is, kind of halfway. Like, what is halfway between slavery and not slavery? What is halfway between being owned and not being owned? Like, sometimes like bias can be used to dismiss somebody's opinion that is actually informed. So I agree with you. Humane treatment and freedom of speech are things I agree with. That doesn't mean I have a bias. It means I have a heart. Okay. So let's go to the next one. We already did we cover scapegoating? We did. Okay, we're gonna go this way. That's right. That's what we're doing here. Trump's contempt for liberalism. Does anybody think he doesn't have contempt for liberalism? Okay, and you know what? I might not even make it through this whole thing today, but we'll see what happens. But you're probably getting it, right? Like, I am not just pulling a few random things out of my butt and saying he's a fascist. I am saying if you actually go and you look at the textbook meaning of fascism and decide whether or not he ticks off every single box, he does. He is a fascist. That's not a proclamation. That's not an insult. That is a description of his actual political philosophy. Saying he's anything but a fascist is dishonest. All right, so now let's go to the next one. What was it? Oh, yeah. Contempt for liberalism. Is that a... Do I have a banner for that? Okay, sorry while I... Okay, here we go. Contempt for liberalism and democracy. Fascism rejects liberal democratic values, including pluralism, individual rights, and critical reasoning. The next time I have a discussion with a MAGA that is capable of critical reasoning will be the first. I think most people that are capable of it have already dismissed MAGA because they are capable of it. And that's why there are people on the right and on the left and in the middle that have rejected MAGA whole scale. So, all right, let's go into this. Does Trump have contempt for liberalism? Liberalism in this context encompasses values like individual rights, multiculturalism, rule of law, free press, and equality under the law. So, does any of that sound familiar? Critics argue Trump has shown contempt by deriding these as woke threats to the American strength, often equating liberalism with weakness or socialism. Supporters view this rhetoric as an offense against elite, see, elite, there's that word again, overreach, and cultural decay, not disdain for core freedoms. But the cultural decay is what? Oh, immigrants bringing in other cultures. You know what would be boring as hell if it weren't for multiculturalism? Eating. I mean, but we won't get into whether or not that side is right. They're actually agreeing with the same points. They're just justifying it. Justified fascism is still fascism. Attacks on woke cultures and DEI initiatives. Trump has repeatedly called diversity, equity, and inclusion programs as racist and a poison, destroying meritocracy, vowing to eradicate them from government and corporations. He does this all while appointing the least meritorious cabinet in the history of the country. Are you telling me that in the entire history of in the entire nation of America, there is not a more qualified person for Secretary of Defense than Pete Kesbreath? Is there not a more qualified person in the country than Pam Bondi for Attorney General? His cabinet is a unqualified joke. The only one remotely qualified for his position is Marco Rubio. And even Marco Rubio has disqualified himself by becoming a sycophant. In 2025, he issued executive orders banning federal DEI training, labeling it liberal indoctrination. I don't even know what that means, other than don't hire black people. And I would just, like again point out, reversing racism is not reverse racism. If you have a system established that gives one race a racial advantage over other races, that is systemic racism. And continuing systemic racism is racist. Alleviating systemic racism is not racist. They conflate those two things dishonestly. He mocked climate change as a hoax invented by China and withdrew from the Paris Accord, prioritizing fossil fuels over global cooperation. This is so ridiculously untrue that it doesn't even merit a conversation, except again, the people that are not capable of reasonable thinking will not accept it. Global warming and climate change are not something that is going to happen. It is something that is in the process of happening. And I'm not going to go into a bunch of details now, but there's a playlist for climate change on my channel where I have gone into this in depth. I have over 50 videos on this. Watch them and tell me that climate change is a hoax. Xenophobic rhetoric against multiculturalism portrayed immigrants and minorities as animals or vermin invading the liberal open society, tying into 2025 mass deportation plans that bypass due process. And if you look at his rhetoric and Stephen Miller's rhetoric against undocumented migrants, which, by the way, it's not just undocumented migrants. They're going after documented migrants too. They're going after people who came here legally, stripping away their legal right to be here and then calling them illegal. Critics link this to fascist echoes, eroding liberal pluralism. Supporters say it's border security. It's not border security, and it is prejudice, especially when you start stripping away the rights of people that came over here legally. Once you started doing that, you lost all credibility in that argument. And something else I'm just going to discuss at a later date. Our nation was built by I don't want to say unskilled workers, but workers that, have quote unquote unskilled jobs. I'm sorry. Going out and picking strawberries is a skill. You can't just take somebody that has never done it, and they're not going to pick as many strawberries in a day as somebody that has been doing it for years. Like, everything is a skill. But the low-wage workers willing to take the low-wage jobs have always been filled by immigrants. And they are the foundation of what has made America what it is today. Our country cannot survive without migrants willing to take the low-wage jobs. So yes, we need to do something about immigration policy, but we need to change the policy that allow for immigrants to come over here legally and stay here legally. Right now, there is not a policy that allows that or supports that. That's the problem. The problem is not open borders, a made-up thing by Donald Trump. The problem is that they're not open enough. There's not a way for people to come over here. And it's not just them that suffers. And we don't suffer when they come here. Small farmers suffer when they don't. Construction companies suffer when they don't. The companies and businesses which are losing, which are going bankrupt right now, they're the ones that are suffering. And eventually, we're going to suffer when the housing prices are going up as they already are, when food prices are going up as they already are. This damages the country not having low wage migrants work here. And also, for those that are going to say, oh, well, you would have said, well, we're not going to be able to, who's going to pick our cotton? That's my favorite one. Like, who's going to pick our cotton? Like, they're protecting the migrants by deporting them to be murdered. I agree that part of the reason we need immigration reform is so that migrants are protected and are paid a fair wage for what they do. But right now, it's almost impossible for small farms to be able to bring in migrant workers because on average it costs $7,000 more per worker for them to bring people over on H-2A basis. And most farmers, even a small farmer, needs 10 migrants to, just harvest their crop, or 10 workers. And Americans just are not doing that job. So to pay for 10 immigrants to come over here and do the job is going to cost him $70,000, more than what it already costs him. And he's making $50,000. So that's going to mean it costs him $20,000. Right now, it is not economically viable for small farmers to operate with with legal labor. Let me just say that. It is not possible for a small farmer to operate a farm legally right now. And that's the issue. And that's the change we need to make. We need to change the policy, not remove the immigrants. Scorn for LGBTQ rights, LGBTQ plus rights. Ban transgender military service and roll back protections called gender affirming care, child mutilation. None of this is gender affirming care is not child mutilation. Calling it that is disgusting and ignorant. And I would just like to say on this topic that when you say a man can't become a woman, then you should be the biggest defender of trans rights, because a man cannot decide to become a woman. So when a transgender woman is a woman. A transgender woman cannot decide to be a man. The brain chemistry is involved. A transgender person cannot fundamentally just change their brain chemistry. And if you don't understand what I'm talking about, don't just say stupid things. Learn about it. Learn about how chromosomes affect brain chemistry. Learn about how chromosomes and transgender people go together. Like, learn. Don't just go off of your ignorant, the Bible says bias. Actually learn what you're talking about. And so this is seen as liberal equality promoting contempt for liberal equality, promoting global condemnation and domestic boycotts. Right. And, also they're going after gay marriage now too. So, and, like I see all these people, well, Charlie Kirk was just criticizing that, the voting or the Civil Rights Act because it gave rights to people like transgenders and gays too, which is right. It did do that, but that's not why it's wrong. Transgender people deserve rights. LGBTQ plus people deserve rights. And black people deserve rights. The idea that giving them rights was bad because it gave other people rights too is just fascism. All right, so now we've okay, so now that's liberalism. What about Trump's contempt for democracy? Got to check my time here. Okay, we're gonna have to. All right, you know what? This is taking longer than I expected, so this is just part one. I have to end here before I go into the next one because I don't quite have time to go into the next one, but I do have time for the remaining comments. Let's asparagus in Germany. Oh, yeah. I don't think Germans are willing to do this backbreaking work, and I don't think that people are going to pay $100,000 for a visa to come over here and do the backbreaking work either. He's making it harder to immigrate, not easier, and he's making it so only the wealthy can immigrate, and that's gonna. The foundation of our economy is not rich people. The backbone of our economy is not rich people. They thrive. The rich people would not be rich people if it were not for people that work low paying jobs. So you're either when you take away everybody that is willing to come over here, like this is, you want to talk about who loves America? Migrants. Nobody loves America more than they do. They love America so much, they walked across half a continent to get here. They risked their lives to get here. And they did it so they could pick strawberries. And hoping that picking strawberries would give a better living for their children. So that their children could grow up and go to college and have a better life than they did. And you're taking that away. And when you have people aren't going to college so that they can pick strawberries. People aren't going to trade school so that they can pick strawberries. There's a reason that farmers can't find domestic labor, which, by the way, is, did you know this? Before you can bring over a migrant worker, you have to run an ad for 30 days and prove that no qualified applicants came to fill that job. Right? So there aren't people lining up to go pick strawberries. The made up fictional guy that's sitting in his mom's basement playing video games so that he can collect Medicaid, whatever that means. By the way, you don't collect Medicaid. You're on Medicaid. And you get your health care coverage if you have a health condition. If you're on Medicaid and you're not getting health care, you don't get anything. Oh, sorry. So I forgot where my thought was going there. But I think you got the gist. All right, so a few more from Halbeck here. As you said, who is willing? Yeah, who is willing to do? Just go ask. Are you? Ask the MAGA. Okay, if you think it's so important for the migrant, for all the immigrants to be supported, why don't you quit your job and move to California and pick strawberries for a living, or move to Texas and pick strawberries for a living? Go ahead and do it. Put your money where your mouth is, Pilgrim. So, okay, he asked about the visa thing, which I mentioned probably right after he said that. But anyway, need to cut off before we get to the 2-hour mark for various reasons. Once again, I appreciate you guys. I thank you for listening and for watching. I will do part 2 tomorrow because this conversation, we're only halfway through it. But I don't want to rush through it. I did another episode where I kind of went through all of this in about a 10-minute explanation. And then I was accused of cherry picking or taking things out of context. So I'm going through in detail. I don't think you can honestly, you can say I'm being dishonest about anything here. I am representing exactly what Trump says and feels, and each of those things is ticking off fascist bookmarks. So I'll just conclude by this. The violence in America right now is not being perpetuated by the rhetoric of the left. The violence is being perpetuated by the actual fascism on the right. And I'll come back and I'll talk about that more tomorrow. But for now, once again, I say thanks for watching. And I'll see you later on the Punch Show. Oh, by the way, let's have a pun. Since it is the Punch Show. Why did the buttermilk appreciate fine art? Because it was cultured. Okay, there you go.